everyone. Welcome back to Where It All Began. I am so excited to be talking to today's guest. Their family and my family have been friends for almost my entire life. I grew up with their sister. Their mom was a teacher with my mom. It's just a full circle moment for me. I'm so incredibly excited to be talking to Boe Wank today. Bo grew up in the same hometown as I did. We will talk about that a little more in the episode. We have not performed together or worked together, but I have seen them perform in other shows. They are so incredibly talented, such an amazing dancer, starting to work on the choreography side of pieces, learning to do that teaching aspect of it, which is so amazing. They're based in New York, so if you ever get the chance to work with Bo, please go do it because they are so much fun to work with. Such an amazing human. Love them with all my heart. So, without further ado, let's get into it and find out where it all began. How are you?
I'm doing fine, thank you. How are you? How are things?
I'm doing well, doing well. So, welcome to Where It All Began. That's the name of my podcast, just kind of getting to the roots of, people's lives and their hometowns. And so, as we were talking before, the goal with the podcast is to kind of shine the light on the people in our lives that helped us along the way, the youth versions of us, the teen version of us. When times got hard, they were kind of the safe havens to go to. And it's crazy to think about because I've known you almost my entire life. I didn't have your mom when I was in elementary school, but our moms working together, I've always known of you, and I grew up with your sister, and so I think it's crazy to think about that. You might not know it, but you and your mom were such bright lights in my life, especially in like middle school, being able to go to the high school shows with your sister and your mom. I remember have such a vivid memory of going to see Seussical when your mom took me, and and then seeing you in 42nd Street. I still have my little sailor hat that you had the cast sign. It's in my room in Ohio. It's on my shelf. So I think it's nice that like it's kind of a full circle moment that I get to now hear your side of it, having you were kind of that person for me and your mom was that person for me, and so I think it's nice to kind of get the other side of it. So if you're ready, I'm just ready to jump right in and start asking questions.
Yeah, let's go.
Awesome. So we're from the same hometown. Growing up in a small town can it's a different experience than being in a big city and, not a lot of access to theater sometimes. So what was your kind of journey into theater starting out in such a small town?
Yeah, so I always say that I won the lotto big time being born to the family I was born to.
Mhm.
I got very lucky and I don't take it for granted at all. Especially now that I'm an adult and I'm out of those really, temperamental teenage years and all that fun stuff. But being born to the parents I was born to, I'm also the oldest in my family. So I'm the first kid. So I kind of got the benefit of being around for a little bit as the only child with two parents who were really big supporters of the arts. And basically, as soon as they felt I was able to handle it, which I think I was pretty young, I think I was probably about 3, they started bringing me to everything. They would take me to the Stranahan in Toledo. They take me to the Ohio in both Cleveland and Columbus to see touring shows, which was really one of the ways to get me to sit still. A very hyperactive, but very sensitive child as well. And one of the things that I would just get lost in was performance. And it could be musical theater, it could be the symphony, it could be the ballet, it could be anything. I just really, really live performance really spoke to me. And in addition to that, my parents are also big film fans. My dad especially loves the golden age of cinema. So we're talking like MGM musicals.
Mhm.
So I was watching Singing in the Rain starting at before I could even really register what it was. And at that age, it was like witchcraft to me. It would just like suck me in completely. So it became very obvious to my parents that this was something that held my interest. And pretty much, I moved around kind of a bit when I was little. So I was born in Tiffin, right outside of Findlay, lived there a little while, and then I started school in New Regal, really small town. Then we moved to Fort Wayne, Indiana for my dad's work. And I was there for about 3 years. And then we moved back to Findlay. So there was a little bit of hopping around. So I'm not one of those kids that's like, I started at this dance studio and I stayed there until I was, I wasn't like that. There was a lot of moving around. There was a lot of my parents being really young people. They had me in their mid-ish 20s. I think they were like 25, 26. So by the time that I was, a toddler, they were younger than I am now by a good deal. And it's, I have a lot of grace for them being young people trying their best to really like raise up this kid and give me as much as they could at the time while they themselves are young adults still figuring out everything they could do. But my parents really always paid attention to our needs. And so as soon as they were able, they put me into dance classes. And I hopped around several studios, some private teachers, made it work with my schedule. And as soon as I could, I started performing with youth theater programs and all of that, which especially with my mom. My dad is a huge supporter as well, but my mom loved getting involved with him too as a counselor, an instructor, even just chaperoning. It really spoke to my mom in a big way. And so it was kind of always something we could do together, whether I was participating or just seeing it. And so that was the biggest way that I got involved was my parents literally opened the door for me and ushered me right in. I never had to. This is a lie. My dad, who's a huge sports fan as well, did ask me one time if I would try it out, if I would try playing baseball. And I did it the same time that I was playing Lewis in The King and I. I think I was 8 or 9 years old. And I remember that summer because I absolutely loved going to King and I rehearsal and I had the best time of my life. I remember when that show closed, I was like sobbing for a week. Like it's very much the same thing we all feel when we have a great contract and you're like, no, it's over, these people, this, that. But at the same time, I was playing baseball and I hated it and I wasn't good at it. The only time I liked it, and my dad remembers this fondly, is one time I like completely accidentally like had a home run or something amazing. It was not because of skill. And I remember after that, I was like, that was fun because I like to be good at things like every gifted child. But no, it was very obvious that summer. I tried that out to kind of humor my dad, see if that was something we could share. Wasn't right for me. Thank God Ella came along to bring some sports to. But it was very clear that I was going to be more team arts. And my dad, being a real champ, didn't take that on the chin at all. He just wanted me to try it, see what I thought. Didn't like it? Good. That's all he asked. So yeah, they opened the door for me, ushered me right in, and never ever asked me to leave it.
Yeah. Well, and how nice that they were so in tune, to realize how in love you were with it. Every story is different, but it's so nice that they were so in tune of like so young too that, you were watching a movie and you were just completely locked in. And I remember working with your mom at, the first press doing all the camps and she'd always be there. And so it's just nice that it was so because your other sister also does theater or did theater, Anna, right? Yeah.
Anna, and she still is somewhat involved because she teaches at Finley High School now. I
Yeah.
think, and she's had her busy times and she's had her less busy times, but she still likes to be involved with the Playhouse, Fort Finley Playhouse, other community theaters. And yeah, she always really had a wonderful outlet as well in the performing arts and still incorporates it into her own life.
Yeah. Did you ever do work at the Playhouse? Because I remember seeing like the pictures of her and like Avenue Q and stuff doing stuff. Were you ever involved at the Playhouse?
I actually wasn't. So by the time that I really was conscious of the Fort Finley Playhouse, I was very like knee deep, no, not knee deep, neck deep in high school. And as you know, having gone to the same high school, you have to kind of pick one or two things, and those are what are going to dictate your schedule. And I was really dead set on being in Finley First Edition, the show choir, for listeners who don't know what that is. And I was really dead set on that since like middle school. So by the time I entered high school, I had put community theater on the back burner. I used to like kind of be jobbed out to universities to play like teens and young people. And I started doing that in the summers sometimes when available, but theater took a little bit of a back seat while I was really focusing on that. All my friends were doing it. It was like, I think Finley High School's maybe, I don't know if it still stands, but Finley High School might be one of the only places where show choir was kind of a cool thing to do. When I was there, like a lot of the cool kids did it. So like a lot of my friends were pretty popular and I had a generally good time doing it overall. With my friends, I had a great time, and with the other people I met, I had a great time. But no, and it's something I sort of regret. You know, I would have loved to have continued to be involved in community theater because it's still something I really find super noble and important. Because when you work in this field professionally, the starts to take over, you know, and you start worrying about things like how much money is this going to be? And that's not, you have to make a living, but a lot of things can get in the way of the actual love of the art. Whereas when you're doing community theater, what you have to remember, and so many people will mock it and make fun of it, and whatever, I don't give a shit about that because good and bad art exists everywhere, whether you're a professional or amateur or a hobbyist. But what I find so admirable about it is that these people who have full time jobs, lives, kids, school, name it, are taking time to volunteer and often even pay to be there so that they can do this thing that they love and that they can participate in this and actively stay artistic. And to me, I think that that's incredibly noble because all that you gain from that is the satisfaction of the art. So I've actually often, Anna did so much community theater that I was like, oh, I feel like I really missed out on this. This would have been a really inspiring environment for me.
Yeah, yeah, and it's so nice. It's just another safe place, and because high school's one thing with a theater director, and that's its own safe place. But then community theater, you have theater moms. I mean, the amount of like theater parents and aunts and uncles that I have is crazy because it's just such another like, my mom didn't always want to sit at a tech Sunday rehearsal for 15 hours and you have the other parents that step in and say, "Oh no, we'll take him to lunch." And then it just becomes a family, more so
Yeah,
than high school kids your own age.
totally. Totally. Yeah. Cause you're not equipped to parent, you know, when you're also 16 years old, you know, you're
Right.
talking with your peers. And so, yeah, the little bit I did get to do, I did like 2 or 3 shows with Finley Light Opera Company when they existed. I don't think they do anymore, sadly. But I did some of those kind of at the end of the school year. It would usually fall. And that was always pretty easy because by then the show choir schedule was quite a bit lighter, and that would usually be how I started my summers. So that was my little bit of that was me dipping my toe back into it. But I always wish I could have done more, and specifically something at the Playhouse.
Yeah. And when you were at the high school and you did theater, were you under Debbie Benson or was that with Andy Cantrell?
So it was both. There was a little bit. So when I actually, then there was another amazing woman who, when you talk about unsung heroes, she comes to my mind immediately. So when I first started doing high school theater there, when my freshman and for my freshman and sophomore years, they actually contracted a woman from who worked at Arcadia, I believe, and her name was Joanne Chase. I don't remember her married name, so Joanne, I'm really sorry to go with your maiden name, but she was remarkable. And I just thought that she was incredible. Because she had lived in New York, she had been on tour, and she had come to Ohio and, chose a different life. But she had so much passion for what she was doing. And I thought that she was just the bee's knees, and I still do. So she started it off, and I was really lucky. I got my first 2 years with her. And then I think it probably became a lot between commuting between the schools and stuff. I'll never really fully know the reason, but then after that, by my junior year, it was Debbie Benson, and my senior year, Andy Cantrell also helped out. So I kind of had a really big melting pot of high school theater directors.
So, do you feel that being from a small town shaped your approach to your career in the theater world differently than had you been from even like a Columbus or, kind of a bigger city? Do you think that kind of changed your outlook on life in theater?
Oh, 100%. I mean, something that's really important to me in theater and in the arts period is community. Um, be it the community that you build with your cast members and your creative team and your tech staff and everyone, but also like the community that you form when you are running a show. The bulk of my resume has been regional theater. But even when I was on tour, like when you are in those towns at that time running your show, you become a member of that community. You're sharing your work with the community. When you go out and about, depending on the size of the community, of course, people will spot you and be like, "Hey, you were in this," or "Hey, I just saw this show," or "My wife and I have tickets this Sunday." And you get to be part of that. You get to exchange that energy with them and contribute. And that's what really has always spoken to me about the arts, is having that exchange of power, sort of like, I put all this work in to give you entertainment, to give you an escape, to inspire, and you hold space for me. You welcome me into your community. You buy tickets to the shows, which we couldn't produce theater if people weren't buying tickets. So for me, the small town thing really informs how I relate to art. I've never had a particularly individualistic approach to art. I could stand with a little bit more individualism, a little bit more like I'm out for number one. And I've adopted some of that as necessary. But at the end of the day, I really, really, really believe in things like company. I really believe in spreading out opportunity. I really believe in community outreach. Um, and then another thing, and I thought about this when you were talking about knowing my family kind of your whole life, was I have always believed that there are always eyes on you. There's always somebody who looks at you, and not even, I don't even want to necessarily say looks up to you, but looks at you and thinks, I would love the chance to do what that person's doing. I would love the chance to try that out. And I felt that with Brady Miller, for example, because he was just a couple years younger than me, and we shared 2 years in high school together. And it always really encouraged me to lead with grace and to lead with power and to really be myself and to really step into that so that I could be inspiring, hopefully, to younger people. Because frankly, I didn't really have someone that I looked up to when I was those ages. I had teachers I did, like Joanne, like Judy Hall, may she rest in peace, really important people like that. But there weren't students I was looking to that I was like, wow, I want to, I really look up to him, or, oh, she's like this and she's got this energy that I want to emulate. I didn't have a lot of that. And so for me, I really wanted to be that for the people that were younger than me and for my peers, to lead by example. And I think that that's a small town thing. Eyes are always on you in a small town. And you can choose to do with that as you will. As a strong willed person with cool parents who always really loved and accepted me, what I chose to do with that was be extremely authentic to myself. And that, if that ruffled feathers, great. But to me, it was like I was given a space to be me with complete love and complete trust. Not every kid is that lucky. And so, as long as I'm around young people, I hope that young people will always know that they have a place with me at the very least. Hopefully, more than me. But that's a small town mentality I've always taken with me. Eyes are always on you. So, you want to do good.
Yeah, and I think that's something that being from a big city, I don't know much about that because, like I said, we're from the same small town. But I feel like being from a big city, there's so many more opportunities to meet other people that it's not as like saturated. And I think when you're in a small town, and especially with like a community theater or in a high school for 4 years, you're with the same people over and over and over and over again, that naturally you're just going to have those people. So I think, just being from a small town and having that saturation, it's a great mindset to think about that, whether you know it or not, someone is, looking up to you. And, even more than that, sometimes, your family, or, they can grow to bigger things.
Absolutely. And and people talk, it's something that is important to remember. And this is no matter what size town you are, this industry, if you choose to go into it, is tiny. And people will talk. People will, if you're auditioning for something and they're between you and someone who's just as talented as you and they don't know who to pick, they will call people on your resume and they will see what you're like, what your character's like, how you are to work with. And that's why I really believe, we can't be holding ourselves to impossible standards. We are only human, but as much as is within your control, you need to do as much good as possible and to be as collaborative and kind as possible, because there's always a reason not to hire you. There's always a reason not to work with you. So don't add to that list.
Yeah. So can you take us back to the early stages of your career post high school? Because you had gone to Baldwin Wallace, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so what was your college audition experience like?
I had such an interesting college experience. I feel like I was right on the precipice of, because now I feel like every college has a musical theater program and kids audition all the time for so many schools all the time. And I had friends who were auditioning for a lot of schools. There was like one unified when I was in high school, but I auditioned for 5 schools total. I had 4 that I wanted to go to and a safety. And I will not say what the safety is, but I auditioned at CCM, Otterbein, Baldwin Wallace, Wright State, and Elon. And I auditioned for those. I had visited a couple others, but I just really went off vibes and went off my goals. So I wanted to keep it small. And my plan was if it didn't work out at any of them, I would take a gap year, maybe take some classes, maybe come to the city, who knows. But thankfully, it did work out. I got into 3 out of the 5, which is really fantastic. I'm not sure that would happen today. And I ended up choosing BW. The other thing that was interesting about my audition experience was I was injured for all but one of my college auditions pretty severely. I had fractured part of my left foot in show choir rehearsal because we were always rehearsing on like tile over concrete. And I've always been a really strong dancer. So I knew that that was going to be a potential issue. So what I decided to do, and this is like the sheer confidence of a 17 to 18-year-old, was I would obviously do my vocal audition and my monologue, no big deal. I'd be wearing my walking boot. And all those parents, all those audition moms would be like, how are you going to do the dance call? How is he going to do the dance call? I would go into the dance call, whatever. And without asking, I would reverse everything so that I could do it without hurting myself. And I think it actually like really impressed a lot of people because I just was like, I'm going to do it to the best of my abilities and I'm not going to let this hold me back. Now, an injury is allowed to hold you back. That maybe wasn't the smart the world. But I do look back on my young self and think, oh my God, what a bad. Like I was just like, sure, yeah, whatever. You wanted that on the left. I'm going to do it on the right because I can't do it on my left right now. And I think it honestly got me into some of those schools because of sheer nerve. But I have a lot of really happy memories of that time. I think because I didn't overdo it and I didn't make it this big, scary, stressful thing, I had a good time auditioning for colleges. I met a lot of friends, and weirdly enough, when I went to audition at Baldwin Wallace, where I eventually went, I knew I was getting in. I left that audition and I was like, oh, I'm getting in there and I'm probably going to go. At that point, CCM was my dream school, and I had been waitlisted for a certain amount of time. And then I got a letter that said that I was not in the mix anymore. And by that point, I had auditioned for Baldwin Wallace, so I wasn't even sad. I remember I used to be like, oh, please let me get into CCM. I want to go there. I want to go there. But the right place and the right things find you. And I think of that being one of the first lessons that I've carried with me this entire time. When you think this job is the job you need, and you don't get it, it can be soul crushing. But what I always have to remember is the thing that's supposed to be yours will find you. And I learned that during college auditions. And so I think back on that process with a lot of joy. And I think that I went to the right school for me, definitely. Baldwin Wallace was no school is perfect. And I, of course, have my growing pains that I felt there. But to this day, I mean, it's the reason that I have had such steady employment with the company that I currently work for. They have ties with Baldwin Wallace, soon to be ties with Oberlin, because most of Baldwin Wallace's program is shifting to Oberlin to start a new program. Yeah, I had my typical growing pains. Everyone carries trauma from college around a little while, and then you got to dump it. You got to either use it or dump it because we're just growing out here. So overall, my experience auditioning for colleges and attending college is a happy one to me.
And I think it's, kind of that mentality of what's meant to be is meant to be is something that's so hard to grasp in those 9 to 12th grade years because everything, the chemistry of your body is changing and one minor thing happens and it's like the world is falling apart.
Totally.
And so I think, the earlier you grasp that, the happier you are in life. My mom always says you have 10 minutes of human time. You have 10 minutes to complain. You have 10 minutes to you have 10 minutes to do whatever. Then we take it and move on and we're happy with what we get. You wanted the lead, you got the ensemble. Okay, you can complain for 10 minutes, but then we're going to be happy that you have a dance experience in the ensemble.
Yeah.
And so I think, when we have that kind of tunnel vision of something, we kind of forget about all the other great things. So I think the mentality of what's meant to happen will happen, everything will work out how it's supposed to be. It's so hard to grasp, but when you do, it's so freeing almost.
100%. And I am by no means an expert at it. I still have to talk myself through this every single day, practically. Frustrations don't go away. Disappointments don't go away. It's just how do you work with it? How do you move beyond it? Does it hurt? Does it violate a boundary? Does it actually hurt you? Because then you need to really think about, is it worth it anymore? Or is this place worth it? Is this job worth it? Because jobs will come and jobs will go. And when you mention ninth to 12th graders, there's so much pressure put on that age group to have every answer for your adulthood. And you haven't started it. You can't conceive adulthood at that age unless, unfortunately, you're in circumstances where you have to grow up really fast. I was very blessed in the fact that I got to stay a kid until I wasn't a kid anymore. Even then, I had a very soft entry into adulthood. Like, I've got a lot of privilege there. But you cannot expect a 15 to 18-year-old to be able to provide you with solid, concrete answers. And yet it's what's constantly asked of them. When it's like, it's our nature as humans to change, to reprioritize, to find other things. And I know, at least when I was in college, when people, it didn't happen a lot when I was there, but when people would decide to leave the program or to transfer to another school but pursue the same thing, it was always this sort of like, oh, well, you didn't hack it, you didn't last. And it's so funny because I'm like, I look at that now and I'm like, that's such a defense mechanism, because not one person there hasn't had the thought of, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe somewhere else would appreciate me more. You either stay there or you don't. And there's no good or bad answer. It's just a choice you make. And that's all life is. You know, you make one choice and then you make another and then you make another. And all you can do is kind of listen to the guide inside you and really stick with yourself. Is this still good for me? Does this still serve me? Does it not? How can I let go of it? How can I do this other thing instead? And so it's something that I'm glad I learned pretty young, because I have to practice it literally every day. And I think I will have to always practice it every day.
Did you have a moment like that when you were questioning, is this where I should be? Is this what I should be doing?
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, there was a moment in college where the head of my department pulled me into the office and had a couple other of the higher ups in our department there. And she full out told me, I don't think you're competitive in this field. I think you should leave. They didn't do a cut system then. I don't know if they do now. But she was like, I just don't see you growing at the same rate as your classmates. And at that point, I think I was 19. I don't think I'd even turned 20 yet. And that's really hard to hear when you're that age. And, you know, I don't judge. I really try not to judge her for that, because we all just do our best with the tools we have when we have them. But I had to sit there for a minute. And I remember in that meeting, I defended myself for one of the first times in my life. You know, I never really had to in school. There were certain things, you know, bullying and stuff and teachers who didn't get me. But this was the first time that I had to kind of be like, no, you don't get to say that about me. Like, you actually don't know. And you're not inside my head. All you see is what you see when we're in a couple hours of class or in a rehearsal. And also, you're talking about taste here. Like, this is an art form that is subjective. Most art is subjective. So, of course, someone's not going to be someone's taste. If Beyonce can have people who hate her, then so can I. That's fine. And she doesn't feel that way anymore. She like gives me employment every year. She's a great lady, so there's no beef. But yeah, I mean, I've had constant moments where that was one of the first. When I moved to the city, I think it was around, well, I moved there in 2013, but around 2018, I had this moment where I was like, I shouldn't be doing this anymore. This is not sustainable. This is depressing me. I'm putting too much stock in it. And I think that if you don't have those moments, you are like extremely fortunate and extremely delusional. Like, good for you, but also, are you okay? Like, like you need to be checking in with yourself, because yeah, it's awareness. And when you choose to be in a field like this, you trade in things like steadiness is for folks who get corporate jobs, and you trade it in to do something you're really passionate about. And self-doubt is just part of the artistic experience, I think.
And I think it's hard to get to a point of self-advocation, because especially in this field, I mean, our profession is putting ourselves out there for people to say no or they don't like us. You know, you being able to do that is so nice, because I think there are times when you wish you could and either don't have the confidence or it's not the right time. Or I think it's, so what would you say advice wise to get to that place for someone who's in college right now that might be getting the same advice? What would you tell them?
That this is just one person or one group of people. It's so funny, because I was by no means a superstar when I was in college. I was extremely talented and extremely hardworking, just like every member of my class. I mean, really, my class was packed with some superstars, just really fantastically talented people. And most of them don't do this anymore. And I understand, trust me, most jobs are easier and more lucrative than this. Um, but I think about it and I think about how I viewed myself in school as not good enough for this and that. And oh, I'd never be in the running for this sort of thing because it'll go to this person. And then I came to New York and everything was different. Every casting director, every choreographer is going to form their own ideas about you. So, yeah, there's going to be ones that don't resonate with your talent. There's going to be ones that, you're going to have bad auditions. You're going to bomb sometimes, and they're going to say, okay, not you this time. Then you go to the next person, go to another audition, go to another theater, take a different class. Like, this world is full of people and lots of them are waiting to cheer you on. A lot of them are going to resonate with you. So for me, I wish I had heard someone say, hey, this is one school, one program, and one group of people, not the end of the world. And I almost am glad that I wasn't a superstar in school because I came to New York with almost no, I don't want to say that my classmates who were stars were entitled, but there was a certain expectation they had and had gotten used to. I didn't have that. I was basically told that I would be lucky to work, period. And the gag is, I worked nonstop. I worked more than a lot of my classmates. And it's not a contest, but it just goes to show you that one person's opinion of you is not the opinion of you. There isn't just one. So remember, if you're in a bubble, that bubble can be popped and it will be. And it just takes patience. And sometimes it takes a really bold move. And something that I hope to see more of in the arts, especially as I also spend time as a choreographer and an arts educator, is that we have to heighten the fact that we're collaborating here. And it isn't bad to advocate for yourself. And it isn't bad to say, actually, this is what I want, or this is what I'm thinking. There's a difference between being difficult and expressing a boundary or expressing an opinion. And I really wish that I had heard that younger. And it's something that I hope that more and more people in the arts think about how if someone burns a bridge, if someone decides to stop working with you because you expressed something, then that person didn't have your best interests at heart from the beginning. And that's a tough pill to swallow, but somebody else will. You just have to use patience.
And do you think the kind of theater world is changing to that more accepting of that kind of feedback?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's slow and I think it will be slow because theater is so interesting because before you and I'm speaking from the New York City market mainly. Before you really integrate yourself into this, you sort of think like, oh, theater's this place where everyone is accepting and it's super safe and it's this and that. And it's like, think about the fact that it took Hollywood casting a Black Alphaba and an actress who uses a wheelchair as Nessa Rose. It took them doing it for Broadway to finally do the same thing. Because Broadway had cast Black standbys and alternates for Elphaba, but there hadn't been a full-time one, which is kind of crazy when you think about the story being basically about a woman being judged for the color of her skin. And it's so funny because it's like, oh, like, not everything here is that artistic utopia that we all wish we could hold on to. So what I think I'm seeing a lot of is people saying like, no, enough's enough. This isn't right. This has to be a different way. And not everybody's ready to hear that. There's sort of an intermeshing of like the old and new schools kind of being like, well, we're set in these ways and we've got to make money versus like, we need to make theater better. We need to make this a job. Theater needs to have HR. Theater needs to be paying attention to these. So I sense the clashing, but I think that it's a good thing because a clash means that there's going to be progress. And I'm really hoping to align myself right now as my goals sort of align more with less prioritizing of performance and more prioritizing of choreography and education. I want to do that because I want to impart that to students and to young people and really empower them to be fully fledged artists who feel like they have agency. I think COVID scared the crap out of all of us and we learned just how quickly it could all go away. And I think it inspired a lot of us to be like, when I come back to it, it's going to be better. And it's going to be better because I'm going to have a different outlook on it. I'm going to treat it differently because we all survived not doing a show for a year or two. Like, it sucked. It was boring. We didn't like it. But also, like, we lived, we made it through. And so now I think that the standard is higher for the workplace. And that can only be a good thing.
And I feel like that's almost starting at a non-professional level.
I agree completely. And especially because at that non professional level, you have a lot of young people. And what people forget about youth is that young people aren't young forever. Young people age and they start to become more powerful. And a lot of them are going to be the directors of tomorrow, the choreographers of tomorrow, the producers of tomorrow. And this is the kind of art that they're making now. And what I love to see at an educational level, an amateur level, at a hobby level, is I'm really inspired by what I see happening because I'm like, this is the future of theater. This is where we're headed. And so, yeah, I think it's essential that it happens in those places first because the people who are currently in power, and you know, they're a mixed bag themselves, but they won't be there forever, you know? And so this new school of people coming in, I think is going to be doing a lot of good. And I'm really excited about it.
So, kind of traveling backwards in the timeline, you had mentioned earlier about kind of bullies or like a teacher that might not have gotten you. And I don't think that is an exclusive feeling for, especially a male in theater. You know, it's not always the traditional manly thing to do. You don't play a sport, you don't kick a ball, whatever. How did you kind of accept that and overcome that? Because especially at, 11, 12, 13, like we had said, it's like the world falls apart. You know, not everyone likes you or something like that. How did you kind of overcome that feeling?
Part of it was something that wasn't really in my control, which was that I was really blessed to have a great group of friends. And I leaned on them really hard because it was very difficult. I was in middle school in particular, I was bullied pretty relentlessly. Um, and my best friend in middle school is still my best friend today, and I'm really grateful for her. Angie, shout out. But it was really, really horrible. You know, the first time that someone called me the F slur, I had no idea what it meant. All I knew was that the adults around him were really angry and that he got in big trouble, but I didn't know what it meant. And then the teachers explained it to me, and I still was like, I don't see what the problem is. Again, because I was raised by like two parents who like weren't telling me that gay people were bad. Um, which was how they were viewed in the community when I was little. And so I had no idea. And I went home and my parents were like freaked out. They're like, are you okay? Are you kind of, I'm like, I'm just confused. I have no idea what's going on around me. But it was interesting because even before I knew what it meant, it was already being thrust upon me. I was too young to even express a sexual or romantic urge. It was literally just happening because, yes, I was always kind of an effeminate child. And I still have a very strong feminine side that I embrace fully. But it's also because like kids are just, they're bullies. Like they are all insecure little messes who are just going to throw their shit at someone who they view as weaker than them. So by the time I got to high school, I kind of was really tough to bully. I also had come out of the closet by that point. So people coming up to me and calling me the F slur or, you know, all those other things, I'd be like, and like, what about it?
Yeah.
And it didn't work on everybody, but I started getting a kind of quiet respect simply because I was like, you literally had one tool to bully me and now I took it away from you. You know, and I don't think that could have happened if I didn't have the family and friends that I had. It did not happen for a lot of my peers that way. But I feel very lucky in that sense that it was able to happen like that for me. And that was the only way I could get through. Again, it's community. I've always really leaned on the people in my life. I'm very extroverted, I'm re energized by humans. And so thankfully, I got so lucky and had great people around me. But like, even if I take my friends out of the equation, like if I hadn't had that group, and even if I take my family out of the equation, I mean, I would have probably had spent my lunch periods with Judy Hall, you know, an amazing woman who was so loving and welcoming and who every day, I mean, we're from the same hometown. No boy who sings and dances didn't know who Gavin Creel was, you know. We all knew who he was. We all worshiped him. We all looked up to him. One of the few people who I actually think deserved all of that hero worship. I mean, a really, really wonderful human who cared a lot about giving back to the community, as you say. And I think, I mean, without knowing officially, because I never asked him, but who I think also embodies that you always have eyes on you. So you want to be a good example. There's always someone looking at you, looking up to you. And he was aware of that, I think. And he really paid attention to that. And so Judy Hall would always talk to me about Gavin and compare me to Gavin and stuff like that. And that always gave me a lot of hope. So even if I hadn't had the friends and stuff, I remember that if I felt like I needed to escape, I would Google search Gavin Creel and I'd watch YouTube videos of him. And I'd be like, it's okay. Like, he's gorgeous. He's gay. He's got boyfriends. He's on Broadway. Like, and he's from here and he's fine. it's all gonna be all right for you. And then when I finally got to meet him and we were able to chat and stuff, that just hit the point home even harder. It's all going to be okay. You know, you did the hard part. You toughed this out. And so yeah, I got really lucky. But even if I hadn't been as lucky, I did have those people, thank goodness.
And what was your coming out story like? You know, how old were you when you had made that kind of realization of, oh, okay, this is what it is, and then because finding out, kind of confirming it for yourself is very different than confirming it for the world. So what was that like for you?
It was like a multi-tiered experience. So I always kind of joke that I got to like skip round one because I never had a question in my mind that I was gay. There was never a question. I didn't have a period of torment or a period of like where I was dating a girl but wasn't into her. Like it just was never a question to me. I was never ever attracted to women ever. I loved them as friends. They were always my best friends. In fact, I didn't have male friends until high school. I was afraid of boys. I didn't like them. But girls were great. So like if anyone was going to fall in love with a woman, it was going to be me, but I just like couldn't, you know, I just wasn't going to. So I knew forever that I was gay. I didn't. The first person I came out to was my best friend Angie in eighth grade. She was my test round because I was like, well, Angie loves me. I was like, if my parents don't accept me, that would be harder than losing a friend. So like, I would hate to lose Angie, but I can afford to lose a friend. I don't want to lose my parents. But it went great with Angie. Angie basically was like, duh, like so it like went great there. And then the next people I came out to, I just started telling people my freshman year of high school. One, because I was sick to death of being bullied. I was so over it. I was so tired of it, especially when I knew what they were saying was true. Like, and I knew it not to be a bad thing. And I also very actively knew it to not be a choice. So I was like, that's like bullying someone for being brunette. Like it's just wrong to do. But you know, I mean, people are bullied for things they can't control all the time. So I remember my freshman year, we were doing Hello Dolly at the high school. I don't know if they did these when you were in high school, but did you ever have to do like announcements? Like you would do like a little excerpt from the show or say like a themed announcement being like, we opened this show this weekend. Holy
We didn't do that for the high school. We would like normally would have like a teacher announce it, but we did it for like the radio. We went to the radio station and we like talked and but it wasn't for the high school.
Gotcha. So similar thing, just different outlet. But I did one for Hello Dolly, and I got like made fun of quite a bit apparently. And my friend Carrie came up to me at our lunch period, and sweet thing, she always wore this blue mascara, and she had blue streaks down her face from crying. And she's like, "Bo, the boys in my homeroom were being so nasty, and they were just making fun of you, and they were calling you gay." And I was like, "He's not gay. He's not this." And I went, "Carrie, I am gay." And she's like, "Oh." Oh, I always wanted a gay friend. You know, it was like that sort of thing that like a 15-year-old would say. But I put it off with my family for a little bit just because it's like it feels higher stakes. Even though my parents and sisters and stuff gave no indication it would be an issue, I'm like, well, it'll be fine with everyone else, but not me. You know, they love gay people, but they don't want their son to be gay. I had a little bit of a rebellious streak in high school, and I was a little on the promiscuous side. And I, one time after watching SNL with my dad on a Saturday night, went into my bedroom and I was having a raunchy phone call, which is so gross because I was 16 years old. But I was having a raunchy phone call. And after I hung up, I heard like a knock, knock, knock. And I was like, oh my God, oh my God, what do I do? What do I do? And I opened the door. It's my dad. And he was like, what are you doing up so late, Bo? And I was like, I was talking to Angie on the phone. And he's like, oh, Angie on the phone? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, what did she call you for? And I'm like, you're just working on a project. And it's like, that's where I flopped because Angie's like so much smarter than me. So I like, Angie would not be calling me at 1 a.m. to ask for advice on a project. That happened. And my dad very sweetly was like, buddy, I'm going to need to take your phone. And they made it very clear that I was not in trouble for being gay. They were like, listen, Bo, I know that this is not the way that you wanted us to find out because they found out from that. I hadn't had time to delete any text messages and stuff like that. I had some pictures. And so that's how they found out, which is such a funny story. And we now kind of giggle about it. But yeah, I found out after that. And it was like my worst fear for years. And like most of the things I was most afraid of, it ended up like really not being a big deal at all for me. Again, lucky. But yeah, that's how it all happened.
So going into your career, what, you know, this profession, is a roller coaster of success and then low points. And then you're like, hey, I have this contract. And you had kind of said that and I see your Facebook and Instagram, and you've been very fortunate to continuously be working. And did you have moments, and I'm sure you did, of like a dry spell of I'm not getting anything, or even just like this contract wasn't great? Like, what were kind of those low points of the career, and kind of how did you navigate those?
Yeah, those are really hard because those are, and the hardest ones actually in my experience are the contracts that are rough. When you are doing theater in high school and even in college, like, and some of your like summer stock experiences, that pay you like $1,200 total for 3 months of hard labor, like those turn into like love fests a lot of the time. Like you just like you're partying and you've got all these friends and it's so much fun and this and that. And that is so amazing and magical. But what you don't learn until later is that it is not common. And a lot of jobs end up being just JOB jobs, like any other job. And so that's something that was really hard. There's a lot of times where you'll be on a job and it won't be fun and you won't feel like you're used in the way that you want to be used, or you're really clashing with somebody that's in your cast or one of the creatives, or heck, I've clashed with artistic directors who I just didn't have respect for, who I felt like were treating people badly. And it's a really hard position to put yourself in. But the way to get yourself out of that for me is just like, I'm really proud of the person that I am. I think that I am a pretty morally aligned person. I think I have good values. And what I always say to myself is, yeah, you know what? If it's not great, it's one thing, but like, how do you feel? Does this align with how you want to maintain your career, with how you want to navigate through the world? And if it doesn't, and it ends up being a bad experience because of it, then with that, what your control is there, then don't go back to that theater. Like there's been so many times where I've worked at a place, hated it, didn't audition there anymore, you know? And as for dry spells, I've definitely had them. Right after I got off of tour, I had like and this is not going to seem like very much, but I had like a 6 month period where I wasn't even getting callbacks. And I was like, oh, shit, like I left town too long, like they've all forgotten about me. But then, of course, things will pick back up. And it's just like the thing with this industry that you just kind of have to get used to, because it is what it is that it's like playing a board game and then putting it away. You have to start at one, and then you play the board game, and then you put the board game away, and then you get another one out and you start at one. And you either can deal with that or you can't. I think it's just kind of a discipline you teach yourself. And in the in between times, what I have found the most helpful, especially when performing was my main priority, was both finding and creating work that I still felt fed by, whether it was artistic or not. I used to regularly, whenever I wasn't on contract, work front desk at Soul Cycle. And I had great friends there. Like we had so much fun. And a lot of them were also artists. So like, a lot of them were dancers. So we would all like, we would put each other's choreography on tape, or we would like, we would go record songs together, or like someone would produce a cabaret and we'd all go cheer them on. And then word of mouth kind of started spreading after I had gotten back from tour, and I started getting into teaching in choreo. And that has like really opened me up. I started teaching quite a bit in New York City starting in 2015. And I have basically always had at least some element of dance teaching and or choreography in my life every year, with the exception of the pandemic. Um, and so that has helped me so much that in fact it's become something I want to focus more on in terms of my life in the arts. Because I really love being on that side of the table. But even if you aren't getting paid, I think it's important in the in-between times to stay an artist and to stay creative. Because a lot of times you're waiting for someone's permission, you're waiting for someone to cast you or to hire you. And yeah, that's the goal for a lot of people. But how do you keep yourself uplifted in that time? That's a really personal thing. And it requires you to really examine how much you still love it. Are you willing to still put the work in if you're not getting paid? Are you willing to put the work in if you have to pay? Like dance class always was such a thing for me. It was always so, I haven't been in a minute because of my schedule, but when I would be between contracts, going to dance class, seeing teachers I loved, seeing friends I loved, like, and it wasn't an audition, it was a different level of stakes. That always really got me through creating my own work. I actually keep them in a journal. I've always sort of heard music and seen dance. And so even if I don't think it's good, or even if I think it's just, even if I only have like an 8 count snippet, I write down every dance that I've created, because who knows when I'm going to be able to use it again. And that has actually proven really useful as I've been hired as a choreographer. If I'm, a little dry one day, I'll be like, wait, this song kind of reminds me of that. And I know that I had, 32 bars of that at one point. Let me go through my notes. It's like, and it's so disorganized. It's like I have a journal, I have my notes app, I've got a million things. So it's not the streamlined process. But I've always been able to feed myself creatively in between the jobs. And I think the most important thing is that you just don't wait for permission to do it. If you were born to do it, then you were born to do it, and you have the agency to allow yourself to do it.
So what was your training like as a kid? Because I mean, I haven't unfortunately been able to work with you for some. You've come to Finley and done like dance class at the Marathon Center, and somehow like our paths have never crossed. And it's one day it'll happen. We'll manifest that. So what was your training like as a kid, specifically in dance, but kind of rounding out that triple threat? Because I mean, you're an amazing dancer, and my mom and I, when we went to Cleveland, I had some audition and we saw you in The Music Man. Had
Yeah.
no clue you were in it. And we're like, wait, is that flipping through the program like, oh my God, that's Boe Wank. It's like we got to see you perform, and you're an amazing dancer. So what was your training like growing up, that led you to that love of dance?
Yeah. So I loved dance, period, before I ever started it. Like, even if I had two left feet and no natural ability, I would love to watch it, and I would love to do it in any extent I could. I've always been very physical. I wasn't always athletic. I'm definitely athletic now and have been for a while, but I wasn't always athletic, but I always loved moving, and I was always very high energy. So but I had a pretty spotty, amount of training until kind of I went to college. I was hopping all over, geographically with the moving and stuff. Like, when I would train a little bit when I didn't start taking dance classes until I was in Fort Wayne. And I took, like ballet, jazz, tap, just the young kids combo. And then we left Fort Wayne and came back to Findlay. And then I didn't dance for a minute. And then I started taking private lessons because that was just easier with our schedule, with a couple different teachers, with Jen Bates, with a guy that worked at Heidelberg, and just kind of would fit those in wherever I could. And those helped me a ton because they were really hard, frankly. I had these hour-long sessions where I was the only student. So like it was intensive. And I felt like even though I had missed out on certain years, like a home studio and years of dancing in a class, I really felt like I made up for it in those times because I had a whole hour focused on just me. And those would be ballet, tap, contemporary, hip hop. I wanted to touch everything. And so that was mostly that. And then, of course, when show choir season would get busy, my main focus would be that, which I don't really think I was trained to be a dancer in that. But what I will say for that is it really taught me how to partner. And it taught me it taught me how to lift. It was my first introduction to that sort of thing. So suddenly I was still gaining discipline there. I also was born with a pretty natural facility, thank goodness. So by the time I went to college, even though if you look at my resume in terms of dance training, it's a little spotty, I was really able to make up for it, and I still tested into higher levels of dance. I also loved it so much and had such a safe space with my dance teachers in college because, especially my ballet and modern teacher, Sarah Whale, she was just this incredibly cool, very alternative, very artistic woman who just like ate, breathed, and slept dance. And dance was an endless vocabulary with her. She had incredible technique, but she believed in pedestrian things being dance. And she really took me under her wing in college, especially because, as I said, I was not a shining star in the musical theater program. I really leaned on her and my other dance teachers to kind of help me feel like had something to really contribute. And so I really shone in dance class in college. I also audited as many extra as I could. I was always dancing. We did this thing at Baldwin Wallace called Ballet Boot Camp when I was there, which was a 7 a.m. 50-minute ballet class. Usually it was mostly bar and a little bit of center. And by the time I was a senior, what you would do is you would take a big, placement exam in the beginning of the year, and they'd place you in one day of boot camp a week. And that was all that was required of you. And my last 2 years, I remember going to boot camp every day. because my thought was, well, while I can take these classes and they're here, like I'm not paying for them out of my pocket right now. I'm going to do it. And so I was just training in school. And I loved taking dance class so much that when I moved to New York, one of the very first things I did was become work study at Steps. And so work study at Steps meant I would work these like I would do these two cleaning night shifts a week that were pretty late. And literally I felt like the Cinderella of New York City. I was like scrubbing toilets so that I could take $2.50 dance classes. But on my days off from work and stuff, like I would take 4 to 6 classes a day. I just loved it. And I still love class. If I could be paid to take dance class, I would. That would be my full-time job. I love it. I think a mix of tenacity, natural talent, and love for training is the reason that I really was able to make up for having a
Yeah.
consistent background.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the self-discipline, it's not easy to wake up at 8 a.m. for a 9 o'clock ballet class, whether
No,
it be a private or a class, in college or so I think it's a lot of the self-discipline too, to be able to get up and do that because it's not an easy thing.
thing about dance is easy. Like if you want to do this and you want to get better at it, it's rewarding and it's fun and it's awesome, but what it's not is easy. You have to hold yourself accountable. You have to be the one going home, doing your stretches, cooling yourself down, working on your flexibility, working on your strength, memorizing combinations, working on technique. And then you got to bring it to class. And then it starts over and over and over. And I feel like my personality aligns a lot with the dancer personality, which is just I've always been a workhorse. I love the work. I like rehearsals better than performing. And that's how I've always been. So
Yeah.
that's really where it is. That's kind of my place.
So looking ahead into the future, how do you see the future of theater? Where do you see it going, and how do you see yourself playing a role into that?
Future theater. There's so many places I can see it going, but I'm going to say where I really hope it goes, which is a more accessible and more diverse and more innovative space. It feels a lot, and again, like this is speaking from a New York market, and I'm not knocking Broadway shows. I personally don't dream of being on Broadway anymore, but for my friends who do, for people who want it, I support you. Get it, get it, get it. I have trouble with corporate theater. I find it hard to sit through shows that are obviously just supposed to make money. And it makes me a little bit sad because I know what the training is. And then two, I see all these brilliant people, these talented people. And I'm like, are you really happy, like singing Eye of the Tiger remix? Like, is this really your dream? Like, and maybe it is. And I'm in no position to judge that. But what I would love to see is I would love there to be sort of a renaissance of the golden age of theater when there would be like 60 shows on Broadway a season. And we would refocus it from trying to run shows for as long and expensively as possible into showing newer, more interesting work, giving that the platform because it's out there. I know so many people who don't do this who are like, oh, another adaptation of a movie, another jukebox musical. Where are all the new ideas? Oh, they're out there. I did a reading of a play that my very dear friend Marcus wrote last night. And it's a really, really wonderful play. Like, I think it has major legs. And I'm sitting there being like, this play, if it gets produced, could be amazing. It could be huge. The trouble is the production. So my hope is that we are able to open this world up to newer, more interesting creators, and that we don't just keep using the same creative teams, the same actors, the same types of things. I want to see sets come back to Broadway. I'm tired of LED screens. I want to see different kinds of people on a Broadway stage. I don't want to see one like size 12 girl in the ensemble and they're like, good for us. She's a big girl. Like, no, she's not. She's a person. And like, there's so many people who go to shows and go to theater and they can't see themselves represented in it and it takes them right out. And my dream for theater is that it becomes this place where the art becomes centric again and where people can once again be like, ooh, this is like human to human exchange and I'm inspired by it again. That's my dream for the future of theater. And I think with young people and most of their philosophies, we will hopefully get there. As for my place, I'm open. I will never ever say I'm done performing because performing and I will always have a love affair. But I do feel like performing is kind of my like really hot, sexy bad boy boyfriend, which is like I kind of like will never quit him, but also like he makes me crazy. He's not always very nice to me. He makes me a little insecure sometimes. And like now that I'm 34, I just like don't like those feelings. I don't want to have them anymore. And I don't really experience those feelings when I'm creating as a choreographer or when I'm teaching and when I'm forming relationships with students. I mainly work with high school and college age students. I'm not amazingly gifted with little kids, but I will do it when I have to. But like teens really inspire me, and I really really honestly look up to them a lot. I think that there is a lot of hope when I talk to them, and so I'm really on a mission to potentially join faculty of a program. I would love to be a new faculty member of a musical theater program, be it one that's already existing or something that makes me even more excited is like maybe somewhere that's a little smaller, maybe somewhere that is on the verge of creating a really cool musical theater program. I would love to contribute in that way. And choreography, I feel really, really natural in that space. I know that I'm good at it. And I feel like I can be a better artist and contribute in ways that matter more to me if I'm on that side of the table.
So I have two final things before we kind of close the curtain on our conversation.
Yeah.
So every year, the Tonys, there's always the acceptance speech of who I'd like to thank, whatever that person may be. What would that speech be?
Yeah. I mean, first, it would be most importantly my mom, my dad, Anna, Ella, and my grandma. Those are the people that have backed me, supported me, accepted me, let me move home for a couple months if I'm like depressed and disillusioned. The people who have driven cross country, the people who drove me to my lessons, the people who helped train me, the people who funded me going to college, moving to New York, those people, I would not be here if they hadn't taken me to my first dance classes and stuff. And those are the most instrumental people to me in the arts. Beyond that, Judy Hall and Joanne Chase, huge props to them. Those are the women who, as a high schooler, looked at me and not only saw someone who could do this, but looked at me and saw someone who had a lot of depth and had a lot to offer the world. And kind of intuitively knew that I was an oddball. And so they really opened their hearts and arms up to me and made me feel certain that I belonged. And not only that, but uplifted me to a point of confidence where I was like really a pretty bold leader. And that gave me the tools to be able to command a room, to be able to choreograph, to be able to dance captain, to be able to do these things that I've done and be a leader in the arts. And I would also thank a woman named Janine Molinari. She was sort of the first. She owns a studio here in the city, and she was like one of the first educators to really welcome me into her studio and to take me on as her associate choreographer for a lot of really great professional projects. She was one of the first to really believe in me that way. And without her, I don't know if I would have ever fallen in love with choreography or known my strength and power in that field. So those are the folks that would get the first mentions in my Tony speech.
So finally, this we had talked a lot about how this profession is not something easy. It takes a lot of work, a lot of drive, a lot of determination. What would be the one thing that you would tell listeners to help them stay focused, to help them stay engaged and, keep pursuing their dream even when the road gets tough?
I would tell them to always check in with themselves to make sure that they aren't getting lost in the business of it, the job of it, to always, always, always remember why they're there. Because if you lose why you're doing it, if you lose your love of the art, if you lose the need that a lot of us have to tell stories, to create, to perform, to sing, to dance, whatever it is, whatever your medium is, if you lose that, then you really don't have much because it doesn't give you very much. It's great when you're on contract most of the time, but you spend a lot of time not on contract too. You hear no most of the time. Most auditions you go to, you're usually not going to book them. Doesn't matter how good you are. Most auditions you're not going to get. So you have to know why you're there. And you have to repeat it to yourself endlessly. And you got to take care of that little artist because we're all still, I always say it about myself, I'm still a 3-year-old in butterfly wings in my backyard dancing around. I'm still very much that kid. I just have a lot of other tools, and the world has shaped me in different ways. But at my core, that's still me. And I have to take care of that kid more than anything. And if that kid is lost, if that kid doesn't know why we're putting up with this behavior, or why we're putting up with this crummy show, or why we aren't fulfilled artistically, then I got to check in with that kid and make sure that we find a solution, at least for the time being. So always check in with yourself, make sure you know why you're there, and remember that this is yours. This is for you. I think artists can really lose their agency fast and put the power in the hands of other people. Take it back. It has to be yours. If it's not yours, then you've given it away for free to people who you don't even know and who don't even deserve it.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. It's been so wonderful talking with you. Is there anything that you'd like to plug? Any projects? I know you're going to Cleveland to do some Shakespeare work. Is there any other projects you'd like to plug before we go?
Yeah, so I'm about to do 12th night at Great Lakes Theater. I'm only doing it in Cleveland because my next show after that, I'm extra excited for. It's sort of a dream show for me and one I never thought I would be in. But this summer in Boise at Idaho Shakespeare Festival, and fall at Great Lakes Theater, where you saw Music Man, I'm going to be doing Sunday in the Park with George, which is kind of every theater. I think it's like most musical theater people's dream show. It's one I never thought I would be in. I was always kind of trained to think of myself as a glorified chorus boy, and to be able to do this show is a gift that I'm really, really amped for. And I also think it's a show that a lot of people maybe would be like, oh, interesting. I remember Mandy Patinkin was in that, blah, blah, whatever. I think it's a show that has a lot to give people, whether you're an artist or not. I think it's an extremely powerful piece, and I want as many people to come see it as possible. I felt similarly 2 years ago when I did Natasha Pierre and the Great Comet of 1812. That was another dream show for me that I was like, everyone needs to come see this show. This is important work. And thankfully they did, and it ended up being amazing. So I'm so jazzed about Sunday, and that's what I want to plug. So people in Idaho or around there, come this summer, see us at Idaho Shakespeare Festival. And folks in Cleveland, you can see me in 12th Night pretty soon, and you can come see me in Sunday this fall.
Awesome. I can't thank you enough for being on here, Bo. It was so great getting to talk to you.
Always a pleasure, CJ. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
All the love to you and your family. I love you all so much. So, such great people.
A big squeeze for me next time you see it.
Yes. Will do. Will do.
Wonderful.
It was great talking to you.
Talk to you later.
Bye. Oh my gosh, what an amazing conversation that we got to have with Bo today. I feel like I learned so much, even though I already knew them. And I feel like we also got to learn a lot about where we think the theater industry is moving towards and where we hope to see it moving towards. If you have the chance to go see them perform in the Cleveland area with the Shakespeare Company there, please go do so. They're such an amazing performer. I have loved every time I've gotten to see them perform. They're such an amazing dancer, such an amazing choreographer. If you're in the New York area and you get the chance to work with Bo, please go do so. It's so much fun. I've actually never partaken in one of the master classes that they've put on, but I have heard that they are so much fun to be a part of. So please go do that. If you don't follow them already, go follow them on Instagram. Boink_90 is their handle, BOINK_90. They say they don't use it that much, but it never hurts to go follow. So I hope that you guys learned a lot. Please go get involved with your local community theater. We talked about that a lot in this episode. Getting involved with that community. It creates such a family, kind of a family away from a family. So please go get involved, go support local theater, go support local art. We talked about that a lot this episode. So please go do that. I hope you learned a lot. Please tune in next week for next week's episode to find out where it all began.